Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the films we watch today and perhaps 30 years ago and 50 years ago. Anyway, we've got another great show for you, and so let's get this show on the road. That's right, everyone. Today we're going to be, Jim and I are going to be talking about Shakespeare in Love and asking the bigger question, does it deserve the diss it gets, the disrespect, the diss? I had to look that up on the Urban Dictionary to make sure I was using it correctly. But first, of course, I want to introduce my co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who is for some reason flicking his hands in the air, Mr. Jim Chaboyko.
That was my silent, what is the beat? The beat applause. I didn't want to run over your...
Okay, there you go. There you go. You get a clap there, Jim.
Yeah. I shouldn't. Look at that. I'm getting in the way of my own light. What am I doing? My blocking is all wrong.
What about your mise en scene, Jim?
You know what? I forgot to put my other light on. Sorry. Apologies.
I also want to give a quick shout out to a great friend of the channel, Mr. Dragon Movie Guy, hanging out in the chat there. Jim, before we really get the show on the road, there was news this weekend of a passing of a filmmaker with rather a remarkable career, Mr. Roger Corman. Seriously, Jim, wow, what a career, eh?
Yeah. You know, I found a clip that I sent you on Twitter of Jack Nicholson sort of regaling.
Getting misty.
Getting misty, yeah. And it was touching, actually, just was describing all the things that were just the backup that Corman had given him, the faith that he put into a young Jack Nicholson, and he broke down a little bit. This is prior to his death as well, it was kind of touching. And then Paul Schrader, that old waited about 4 minutes, as somebody said on Twitter, and said, "I never liked the guy." So that kind of makes me like Corman more.
I Here's Shelley Winters. When it comes to killing, Mama knows best.
Jeez.
Oh, Mr. Corman.
Subtle.
You know, it was interesting. And Jim, I'll put it, actually, I've got it in the description now, everyone. Another friend of the channel, Pugwall316, he was already working on a Corman video about just kind of exploring, Jim. He was exploring how Corman, you know, there was a guy who was wise with his dollars. If he made an element that he felt he could use in another movie, or perhaps 8 other movies, he was using that element, whether it be an explosion, a space alien, a spaceship, whatever it was. The guy was using it. Anyway, he had been working on that, and of course got the news, and so he had a nice couple of notes at the beginning and end of his video on that, and so I got a link to that down in the description, and some of this other stuff I'll refer to. I'll either put it in the description or I'll pin it. But yeah, Jim, I don't know about you. I got to admit, as I was mentioning in the Digital Green Room, if we ever do a ranking ever again, it should be ranking Roger Corman, not his films, but his film titles.
Just the title.
Just the titles. Because they are just, I mean, here, let me, just a sec here. Let's go into his filmography. Maynard, filmography. Like,
well, Little Shop of Horrors right there.
Yeah. It conquered the world. A bucket of blood. A bucket, Jim. Yeah. But seriously, like, The Fast and the Furious was a Roger Corman flick when he's doing the thing with American International Pictures. Carnival Rock, Teenage Doll, The Undead, The Saga of the Viking Women and Their Voyage to the Waters of the Great Sea Serpent. Oh, here's a classic, The Last Woman on Earth, in Vistascope. They fought for the ultimate prize.
Wow. Does he have Romeo and Ethel, the daughter of the Pirate King, in there somewhere?
You would think. But yeah, anyway, I thought that there was a guy who I think really sort of epitomized a part of American filmmaking that really eschewed moralizing, really kind of sort of a wood. I'm thinking Plan 9 from Outer Space. Ed Wood, thank you very much. But with some skill behind it, some talent, and think of it. Think of all the careers he did start. Didn't Spielberg, start in his shop? And there were a number of what we consider like the creme de la creme of filmmaking that cut their teeth on junk. They made lurid junk they made in Roger Corman's studios, a number of his business enterprises.
Well, like they say about, writing something or writing a book is get it finished. And this is a guy who got it finished, very much a DIY kind of filmmaker. And I think that's, when you mentor these young filmmakers and they go off, I mean, he apparently mentored Scorsese and a few other people of that ilk. So really quick anecdote
Francis
here.
Ford Coppola.
Yes. Really quick anecdote. At the 7 o'clock news, the CBC News on the hour, they said filmmaker Roger Corman died this weekend. He was 98. He was known to have mentored Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese.
Oh my goodness.
So the anchor didn't even seem to know who Martin Scorsese was. But anyway,
Wow.
the anchor shall remain nameless. It's a local anchor, but anyway.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? Ah,
Pressure of the moment, maybe. I don't know.
yeah.
But
And yeah, the weekend anchor. This is when you F up like that.
yeah. Calling the intern. But I've never read the news before. Keep watching the skis. Anyway.
You can hear I hear Kent Brockman in the background going, I've got a golf game.
Yeah. Exactly.
Call the weekend guy. I'm not doing this anymore. Chai Rodriguez.
Yeah,
Hope he
Rodriguez,
plays up to par. Okay,
yeah, no,
Jim.
you know, yeah, just on the last thought, I think I have The Terror. I've had The Terror on the DVR forever. I think it's a Corman movie with Nicholson in it. So I think I'll wheel that out later this week, probably.
Excellent. All right, Jim. First of all, I got a bit of a rant, but before I get into my rant, I think this is a perfect time for everyone to shamelessly plug the show and ask for a like, a subscribe, and of course a ringy ding of that bell. Jim, we're getting our sound effect and our action game on. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, I mentioned it in the digital green room. Of course, I'm now going to, and now I'll actually
summer movie season with
whoopsie. Now I'll actually get into this. Couple of things happened this weekend. Of course, our good friend DMG, who's used to us disagreeing, so he'll understand this. Perhaps his guest Zach Milne on his show won't, but I was watching their show. DMG does a regular, hey, next month's movie release is the good, the bad, the meh. And he had Zach Milne from Zach Milne Talks Movies on, and they're talking about The Watchers, which is directed by M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. And one of the questions that came up in that conversation, Jim, was about nepotism. And I was, oopsie, we don't need more of that. And I believe if memory serves, and I've got a link to it in the description to the show, go check it out. Of course, subscribe to DMG's channel, but it was Zach saying, I don't really subscribe to this nepotism thing. And I was like, it's like, okay, I don't know how you not subscribe to it or subscribe to it, but I got what he meant. And I was like, I like, honestly, Jim, I think Zach Milne's a great guy, and a lot of his takes I've agreed with, a lot of them I haven't. And this one, I'm like, you know, geez, Zach, get your head out of your ass. If memory serves, he is Canadian. And the thrust of his argument was, hey, we're all just trying to play the hand we're dealt. And it's, you know, we shouldn't be judging her because she got a better hand dealt than others. And that's all we're trying to do. And all I can think of is like, Zach, I doubt you would go to an Indigenous reserve, a First Nations reserve outside of Toronto. I think he's in Toronto or around Toronto, and go, hey, you should all just play the hands you're dealt. Young white guy out. See ya. Of course, and I don't think he would do that because, I mean, that's he's not an asshole. But when we talk about this nepotism thing and go, this isn't a problem, or like Ben Stiller, oh, you know, everyone's gotten in LA, or was it Dakota Johnson? That question bores me. It's like, yeah, that is only a difference in degree. Not intentional, but it's still like, you take what you say to the logical, you know, follow it through. And you go, oh my goodness, that may be ridiculous. Now, of course, there's another extreme, and otherwise I probably would have just rolled my eyes and moved on with my life, but I saw this on Jim on Twitter. And let's get this. So Joe Russo, he is a filmmaker. You and I have we covered his Beer Run. Nice little film.
Great American Beer Run, I think.
Yeah, the Great American Beer Run. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, guess. So, Joe Bro Movie says, watching that one short film on YouTube that made Aronofsky sign that kid or whatever, I guess some student, some high school student, I think, made a short film. This Jeff Jang, a professional film critic, reviewed it with the 2-word review, "It sucks." Jeff Russo, a 19-year-old made a very good short film, got the attention of Aronofsky and sold it to TriStar. And of course, Jeff saying Jang hates it. There isn't a more toxic critic out there, just pure jealousy and hate. I guess Jang must have gotten a lot of pushback. So he allowed, I know, it's shocking, isn't it? Anyway, Jang got a little pushback, so he evaluated it a bit more. And he had a lot of connections. The young man who made, or the young person who made the film, a lot of connections, like real actors in it. Known names as producers, as executive producers, giving him help in that. And I guess how Jang put it was, he's like, yeah, because it's a pedigree of the cast, executive producers. And he's saying, hey, if I had access to this resource, I would use it as well. And I think his argument is that, well, if you're going to have that kind of pull, you should be able to get it reviewed by a pro. I got to admit, I'm like, that's kind of an whole move. You know, it's still a high, it's a student project, you know. If you're going to review it, then maybe give some real feedback, not it sucks.
Yeah.
But Joe Russo, who's obviously seized of the issue, says doesn't agree with it. And his review tells us why he had it out for a teenager. He wishes he had the opportunity. He's evaluating movies not on their text alone, but on how he would do it. Now, I'm reading that line two ways, Jim. I think on the one hand, I think this is something you and I do, and I'd love to do. It's like, I wouldn't have done the scene that way, and it's missing something. I think a good reviewer, a good film analyst should be able to say, you know, I think it would have been better if. But I think the other thing Joe Russo's getting at, and it's something that I think we all have to be careful of. I just put out a short video on how I let my own class resentments get in the way of my enjoyment of the film alone, talking about past lives. I'll put a link to that video up here. Yeah, he's Russo. That is a reasonable criticism, just as Jang, you know, is almost on it. But here's the thing, Jim. I actually think that Jang only slightly misses the point. It's something that I think is worthy of criticism, and why we should all subscribe to that nepotism thing. Because it comes down to, for me, Jim, two reasons why we should be worried about nepotism in film, especially at that top of the line place. It is incredibly hard to make a film. It's incredibly hard. It's expensive. It's expensive to get the training. It's expensive. Once you even have the training, you go to film school, then you gotta, if you want to play at the big leagues, you're moving to LA, an expensive city. And so all of a sudden it becomes just a bunch of rich kids making movies because they're the only ones who can afford it. One of the issues of the recent strikes was an actor, a performer. She said, you know, this profession shouldn't be for only those who can afford to do it. But stripping it all away, I think there's two key reasons why we should be worried about. One, just simple fairness. Should only those who can afford it be able to make movies, to be able to tell our stories? And number two for me, Jim, is if we let that go, if we say, well, they're just playing the hand they're dealt with, and we're stuck with our crappier hands, never mind the fairness, it really does mean that the only stories we're going to see are the stories of rich people. And I think now that was a legitimate critique of past lives that I could have been more succinct on if I wasn't so wrapped up in my own petty jealousy. But look no further than Modern Family. One of my guilty pleasures. I think a pretty damn good sitcom, but you can't call that a Modern Family. You could call it a modern family of the top 5%, you know? And so I think, yeah, if we don't be worried about this, if we don't say things about it, if we don't critique this kind of thing, we're really just saying that the people who will tell our stories, the people who will get to tell stories are rich people. And they'll tell, then that means all we're going to see are rich people stories. Or if it is about us, it'll be the stories about us that they find that they feel they're comfortable in telling. And that is a terrible thing. I don't know. That's my take on it, Jim. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I wonder how it fits into this day and age when we're talking about all the other things going on, the sort of the undermining of the media in general, the telling the stories of people of color and getting more women directors to create film and that kind of thing. It sort of goes, it can go a little bit against that, I think. If you want some...
How do you mean?
Well, on one hand, you have what you're describing is a certain class of people making all the film, but there's a lot of people talking the talk about, you know, getting other groups that are heretofore ignored, perhaps, in film.
It's called diversity.
Getting their chance, and that could be class, and that could be, you know,
something we've always supported. Gender, we've always talked about it. Race, and that. I just think that this is something else that needs to be included in the mix, especially. You know, you say talking the talk and that, it's like, is it just, you know, you think a studio could go, oh, we got our diversity quotient because we hired Isaiah Washington. It is Isaiah, isn't it? Denzel Washington's kid?
No, that John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But there's the thing. It's like, that I have more in common with the vast majority of poor Black Americans than he does, and he's Black because of my own class, like our economic interests. And there's been a lot of research that shows that our economic interests are combined. Like, this is one of the horrors of the current divisive game that the right wing plays, is to try and see us as opponents when really we are in the same boat, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's, and it's not just film either. If you want a good hate watch, go on YouTube and look up Brooklyn Beckham because he released a book of photography. There's a little subculture of YouTube videos about that.
I mean, but I mean, you think Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie, you know, famous for being famous, which is really famous because they're rich and could get attention. You know what? And this isn't to say, like I mentioned, Ben Stiller. There's one talented and I am not saying that none of these people earned anything, that they didn't earn.
Didn't earn, yeah.
They didn't work hard, that they aren't amazing talents.
Yeah.
What I am saying is it's like they they ain't the only amazing talents. And and Ben Stiller was funny. He did say this in an interview. It's like everybody knows somebody in LA. And it's like, Jesus, buddy, that's your clue. That isn't your evidence that there's no nepotism. That's literally the evidence that if you don't know anyone, you ain't making it in LA. You know? I mean, it's like, listen, all my friends are white and they all work hard. It's like, do you not? Dude.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, and the other thing is there's, finite money out there for projects. There's a finite amount of projects out there. There's finite eyeballs and finite, viewer hours. It's nice to have a sort of a mix of everything. But yeah, if you're watching something that comes from the, people who are going to private schools only, you're going to have a certain you're going to have
Modern Family.
Yeah, you're going to have stories
Yeah.
that, reflect that. So yeah.
Well, and it goes even further. Like, you think A24 is the darling, and correct me if I'm wrong. A24 own. Bear with me.
Yeah.
Is it A24 or is it Annapurna? Crying out loud. There's Annapurna. Anyway, one of these. Some of these players, I think it's Annapurna Pictures. That is one of Ellison's kids, like the Oracle guy.
Oh, Larry Ellison. I
Yeah,
think meant Harlan Ellison there for a second.
Yeah,
Oh,
nothing that cool. So anyway,
I don't think he had kids.
I don't want to. We could spend a whole hour on this, and we've got other fish to fry, including talking about another film, Jim, another Nepo baby film, and that is, of course, Shakespeare in Love. Everyone, I mean, where are my show notes? There's my show notes. Of course, Shakespeare in Love. Long before Harvey Weinstein's name became synonymous with what's wrong with Hollywood now and sort of the evil poster boy for the Me Too movement. He ran what some felt was the most corrupt Oscar campaign in history, but it did pay off with a 1999 Best Picture Oscar for a little film called Shakespeare in Love, robbing another little indie darling. Robbing, Jim, that's the line. Another little indie darling, and that would be Saving Private Ryan. Jim, I looked, and this is one of those things where, and this is why I pitched this show to you, is because it gets a lot of hate, but it's mostly around the fact that it didn't deserve the Best Picture Oscar. Saving Private Ryan deserved it. Spielberg was robbed. This didn't deserve, like, this is just what once again, the Academy doesn't know what it's doing. But before we get into that, we have watched this film. Why don't you give me your, Jim, is Shakespeare in Love, 1999 Shakespeare in Love, a see it or a skip it?
I think it's a see it. I was really quite, I was the first two acts or so, I was kind of like waiting to see how I would feel about it. I didn't remember tons. Yeah, I think it came together in the third act. I know I say that a lot, but if you're patient and you stick around, for me, it's not a. There are other movies you can see uh, instead of this one, but it's got some neat things in it. We'll go over those later probably, but yeah, it's not a super strong see it, but it's a see it. I think for me, just stick around to the end. The third act's a good payoff.
You know what, Jim? I actually. Sorry.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Now you can. Um,
Yeah.
when I'm typing, I
Sure.
like to turn the mic down a little so you're not hearing the clickety clack. Jim, I'm actually giving it a stronger see it. Not like, oh dear God, how could you have not seen this film? But I thought it was
Drop everything.
drop everything. It's funnier than I remember it being very entertaining and a hot flick on at the time, but never really being that interested in watching it again. And then we do this, I watch it, and I'm like, that's better than I thought. Most of the humor holds up. It is some of the humor is inside baseball, you know, because it's ostensibly it is about Shakespeare going through writer's block, trying to make Romeo and Ethel, the pirate's daughter, work. Of course, the script evolves. He meets someone, a young man perhaps, that he totally falls head over heels for, and much zaniness ensues. Does true love triumph? Well, watch the movie. But it's also about the creative process.
Yeah.
It's also about a parody of film and of filmmaking and of theater and theater making and all that. And so I was more entertained than I thought I would be. So yeah, it's a see it for me. But of course, never mind going into that. I think it's time for the spoiler zone. And my first big question for you, Jim. I'm not sure how you feel it on the does it deserve the hate or not? And I'm not going to ask you that question yet.
Sure.
But let us assume, and here, first let's go through some of the hate it gets. So of course, Rotten Tomatoes, like 92 and 80, makes sense. But here we go. 17 movies that should never have won the Oscars, from Shakespeare in Love to Slumdog Millionaire, right at the top, from The Independent. Screen Crush. This is one where it gets on about the actors, including Judi Dench, who was, in the movie all of 8 minutes and got an Oscar. AV Club, number 3 on their top 15 worst best picture Oscars of all time. Yeah, no, it's the...
Move over, Birth of a Nation. I'm just kidding.
Well, this is...
I think that's a little early.
This is part of where I'm going. Yeah, it would have predated the Oscars.
Yes, yeah, I was kidding.
But BuzzFeed. And this is from the BuzzFeed community, so the takes are going to be...
Anonymously hot.
Spicy.
Yeah.
Number 1, Forrest Gump. Yeah, there's a... okay, let me find it, because it was kind of sums up the heat. Here we are. So, quote from Julie ____. Love Judi Dench, but she was in the movie for 8 minutes. Gwyneth Paltrow wasn't deserving, Jim. And neither was the movie itself, especially against Saving Private Ryan. Harvey Weinstein bought those Oscars. Yeah, that kind of, that's a sample, Jim. A sample of the hate this movie gets for winning. And let's assume, let me ask you this. If it does deserve this hate, let's assume it does for sake of argument right now. Why would it deserve this hate?
Yeah, I think I guess in a lot of ways the production design is really good. The costumes are really good. I was thinking this seems like a really
that sounds
good
like praise.
No, but I was thinking to myself that this seems like a solid television production. I think
Really?
maybe Saving Private Ryan, you got a lot of, you have the town set and everything like that. Saving, if they're comparing it to Saving Private Ryan.
No, I'm not talking about comparing.
Yeah.
That's not our goal here.
Just on its own.
Just on its own, does it deserve the hate?
I
and
guess.
Why would it?
Yeah. I guess maybe it's just got, to me, the first couple acts had a real television quality. From the nasty boy putting the mouse down,
almost the
Thomas Kent's neck and things like that. And there's a few little sort of, I did find myself rolling my eyes a couple times in the first couple of acts. But I left myself open to, I was saying, okay, what's going to happen next? And I left myself open to that. And the third act, it paid off. But, I think it's got a bit of a slow start. I didn't quite buy some of the, I just didn't. It didn't ring true in certain areas. I can't really put my finger on it. I don't want to say this performance was bad, this performance was good, but I just, there was something about it tonally that and I have to say, we're just watching pouty Colin Firth for the second week in a row. I guess that guy can. My friend Colin Firth.
You did meet him.
I did meet him, but just a little much for me. But that's totally aside the point. Yeah, it's a little bit slow. It's a little bit television-like, especially the first couple acts. Looks good, but I guess that's what I would say. Maybe it's not cinematic enough for some people, like in that big sense of the word.
Yeah. Now going back to where you started with that, comparing it to Saving Private Ryan. Mm-hmm. Maybe we will go back to that. Maybe elaborate on that a bit more, because you may.
Sure. When you think about these big sweeping war epics with all the, obviously they have all the money, and
Jelly Duck 100 just chimed in the chat. Oh. More like Shakespeare in hate.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, that checks. In terms of a big sweeping war epic, I mean, I was going to say these things write themselves. They don't write themselves, nor do they film themselves. But it's kind of a sucker's game, right? You have death and action and sadness and tanks and planes and guns and bad Nazis, and that's a lot. And it's pretty hard to compete against. If it'd be like comparing, I don't know, Dunkirk and Three's Company. It was two wildly different things. But
yeah. Well, and I think that's maybe this doesn't justify it. You can tell by the thumbnail where I'm coming from here, and my just general opinion of the Oscars. Like all these award shows, they're all ridiculous. But I could see somebody going, that is obviously big, dealing with important themes, and about a thing that, what about the veterans? Won't someone think of the poor veterans? Mm-hmm. Whereas it's a rom-com. Yeah. So it already just considered light, frothy, of no consequence. Mm-hmm. So I could kind of, I don't think that's enough, but I could kind of see where somebody comparing the two might go,
Yeah.
really? You know, but I again, the vitriol
Yeah.
is, I
Yeah.
cannot, and I'm not, it doesn't sound like you can either, you know, justify the vitriol, this contempt.
I mean,
And
I was all set for it when I'm like, this is going to be stupid. Well, I didn't really, but in the back of
yeah,
my mind, I was like, all right, let's see what you got for me, Shakespeare. And yeah.
I, and that's, I think that was my pleasant, I kind of had a preformed idea about the hate, but I was kind of half expecting, it's like, well, you know, is this film going to hold up? And
Yeah.
it held up better than I thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it
You know,
mean it's the greatest thing ever?
no,
No. Um,
a little further to that point though, I kind of, tonally, it's got a goofiness for the first couple of acts. And what surprised me is that the tonal change in the third act, when it's clear that she's going to be going away to this new America place, and the lover's going to be
what?
split, and that nice parallelism with the plot of this doomed romance in Romeo and Juliet, and the doomed plot in Shakespeare in Love, and it turns
Yeah.
from a goofy movie into a tragedy. And with her last chance to actually perform, doing the thing she loves with someone she loves, it's very sad. And it's
Yeah.
very like, this is her last act, especially back then, as any kind of, individual person. And as opposed to just a wife. Which is what she would have been, some sort of figure back then. And, probably not going to be entering into a very good relationship with the Count or the Earl of Wessex there. But yeah, it was, and that was very poignant. The third act, extremely sad. It's triumphant,
Well,
but it's sad
poignant.
as well. Yeah.
Poignant, I think, is the
Poignant,
perfect word. And this is why I think this movie is better than my memory,
Mhm.
and maybe deserves more respect. And I would even say from you, Jim, bear with me, especially given the context of this conversation, the last 25 years of discourse. And then we add in Harvey Weinstein, the modern
Mhm.
Oscars campaign, that kind of thing. But that shows that ability to raise again, a great climax when it suddenly, the stakes go up, the
Mhm.
direction of the film changes. It's subtle, but at the midpoint, all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're like, oh, wait, we're no longer in a farce. We're talking about love.
Mhm.
It still has its farcical aspects. It knows what it is, but it raises the stakes for us all. And I think that is the hallmark of a well-told story, is at the end you come away feeling something that the filmmaker obviously wanted you to feel, without you feeling, oh, they're mashing my buttons and I don't like it.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things that surprised me about this flick. And maybe this is a perfect time to sort of switch to, kind of switch gears. And we're kind of lucky that we did do the King's Speech last week. It wasn't really, well, we talked about this in the digital green room after last week's show when we were talking about this show, and I was like, oh, it'll just be a nice contrast. But then it kind of dawned on me, what is different? There's a few things that are different, but what are some of the things that are different between the King's Speech and this movie, which I would put in the same category, honest to God, both kind of talky, kind of, it's
Mhm.
interesting. You talk about TV, but first of all, comedy. But otherwise, what's really the big difference between the two? And both films were up against, you can't really say, oh, the epic scope of the King's Speech. Most of it's in a room.
Yeah.
You compare this and its competition, and only 10, 10, 11, 12 years later, its competition, which is Inception, talk about epic,
Yeah.
or The Black Swan, very cinematic.
Mhm.
What's the difference between these two films other than, and I'm saying the comedy versus drama, that's almost like cosmetic.
Mhm.
What do you think?
What's the difference? I mean, they're both small
I am
scale.
shamelessly heading somewhere with this, Jim.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that's a good question. You know, one's about community and one's about individuals. I would say, first off, is the King's Speech is about, you know, these individuals trying to make their way in this crazy world, and the king,
This poor king, what's he
poor
gonna
king.
do?
Yeah.
Talk about
and
the nepo baby of all nepo babies.
here's a quick note. There's an old episode of Columbo with Blythe Danner, and it takes place around a tennis club. And somebody gets murdered. I can't remember who the murderer is, but, you know, Peter Falk is one more question kind of thing. That's not an official Peter Falk impression, but Blythe Danner is pregnant at the time, which I believe is Gwyneth Paltrow's first time on screen, but in utero.
the edge, the fix was in
Yeah.
in negative years.
That bump is going to have an Oscar. But anyway, yeah, I would say a little bit of scope. One's more of an ensemble piece, rather than, you know, the other
Yeah.
one's more about sort of just individuals. I guess that would be my main
It's really
takeaway.
the relationship between those two as it develops, and the
Yes.
rest really are supporters. And they don't really, that's interesting actually. There's only a couple that complicate things for our main characters in the King's Speech. But I would argue like that was appropriate to that story, just as this more ensemble cast, because they're putting on a show. It is
Yeah.
like old 30s Hollywood.
Yeah.
Will the show go on? A ragtag, scrappy group, the theater's being threatened,
Mm-hmm.
which is, again, I think another sort of, there's more going on in this movie
Yeah.
than maybe a lot of people know, but it's another layer, right? I guess my argument would be, Jim, there's not much at all. There's like no difference, but there's very little difference, especially when you strip it all away. I could see what you're saying about the almost kind of TV quality of it at the beginning, but that's a lot of comedies. They just, you know what,
Yeah.
you know, how often do you see a comedy where you go, cinematic?
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
they've got to deal with a different kind of
Scope or scale.
yeah, you know, that it's all about make sure the joke lands.
Was it? It's
Make
all in
sure
the two shot. Is that what the?
Make sure the joke lands.
Yeah.
Make sure the comedy works, you know, and then we'll get the filmmaking. Hopefully the filmmaking will work out as well. Although I do think, and the little teaser, I don't know, a hint for next week for folks who are still in the chat. DMG is still my friend. Next show might be about a comedy that I would say is also stellar filmmaking. But more on that later. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything qualitatively different. You know, that if we were to give them a number, let's say one's an 8, the other one is at best 8 1/4 or 7 3/4. They're in the same class. In a Venn diagram, they'd be in the same circle. And so why do we just kind of forget about the King's Speech, you know, as a pop culture thing? Even though, and you brought it up, like Harvey had his fingers on the King's Speech as well. The greasy piece of so why is this one get all the grief and the King's Speech? No one goes, Christopher Nolan was robbed. No one says that. Aronofsky was robbed. No one says that. They'll just kind of, oh, well, Whereas this thing that has, like I said, it's a poignant end. It is about a universal theme, but, and Spielberg, I appreciate that, he wasn't able to make a movie after that. Only received a couple of Oscars before then.
Yeah.
Whether poor Steven Spielberg. Back to making movies with a Super 8 camera.
I sort of wonder, sometimes I think, I don't want to rile too many people up of the wrong ilk, but in the same way that Justin Trudeau drives some people absolutely crazy, I think Gwyneth Paltrow, and I don't think we should overlook this, I think maybe that's part of it, is that some people just, some people love her, some people can't stand her. And maybe that's part of it as well. Maybe part of it is just people being confident and successful, with this one. But yeah, I don't think some of the external things, worry about what you can control, as they say. But some of the external things, I think, are it's not just the movie. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So
I think I would put it in a bundle of, Gwyneth Paltrow. And I think she's a ding-a-ling. And with Goop, a bit of a dangerous ding-a-ling. Her new age bullshit. Sorry, bullshit. Bullshit. Oh my goodness. I am just hitting all the wrong buttons here. Word to you kids out there, try not to produce your own show if you can at all help it. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is one of the reasons. The genre, rom-coms, a lot more women-centric, right?
Women-centric. That's
women-centric.
Another thing.
It's this versus important filmmaking like Saving Private Ryan, one of the most pro-war movies. And I don't mean it like Spielberg, some warmongering right-wing maniac. I do not mean that at all. I think, much like we talked about other films of that genre, he is sincere in that film and in his filmmaking. I don't think he wants to send his own children off to war. That's not where he's coming from. But he that movie makes war look good. Makes it look so cool and so meaningful. And so compared to this, it's just a little rom-com. It's a chick flick. I think a lot of that mean on for it, that petty that petty jealousy. How dare that film take that,
Yeah.
How dare Gwyneth Paltrow, even though it's like just Tom Stoppard, Madden, but also none of these people are Americans. Tom Stoppard is an American. Ed Zwick, is an American, but, you don't even have to get to Harvey Weinstein's just awfulness to kind of go, I think it already had all these reasons to, hate on it. And then the usual petty about, I remember when I was at the Winnipeg Film Group and I brought it up. This is when I just started getting into film and taking those first few courses, hadn't made any money in that yet. And I asked one of the, older hands around who, made his own films and made money in the local film industry. And he's like, it's all because of Tom Stoppard. That's the only reason it got that. And it's like because it's his name. And it's like, now that I watch it 25 years later, I'm going, I don't know, maybe it was actually pretty good. Kind of like we talked about the King's Speech. It's like, this isn't a bad movie. This is good. It's entertaining. It was a hit. It was a big hit.
Yeah.
Four-quadrant hit.
Well, I think you're onto something about the. I think it's easier for people, and they maybe won't even come out and say that because it is a. I mean, Joseph Fiennes is the main character, but it weighs heavily on Gwyneth Paltrow and just it being a rom-com, a bit of a, as you're saying, chick flick, and I think because Paltrow got all the attention for it, it's so much easier to dump on it. And I'm not saying that everyone out there is misogynist, but it's sort of ironic in a movie in which
just as I don't think
a woman can't act because she's a woman, she's being not allowed to pursue her passion in life, that people hate it because it's a chick flick.
Kept out of a thing for a, geez, if only Gwyneth would, or if only not Gwyneth, if only Viola would just play the cards she was dealt.
Whoa, wraps it up. Holy cow. Good night, folks.
I believe I get, you know what, Jim? I think there I deserve one of those. DMG does, just a sec, Jim. Let me pull DMG's comment up front. You can always count on DMG. You always can count on Dragon Movie Guy with the zinger. Is he'd argue the laxative scene in Dumb and Dumber is cinematic, especially the sound design, and that also deserves a rim shot. Thank you very much, DMG.
Dumb and Dumber was on the other night, and it was when you and I were going to Civil War, and I told you this too. I thought, I literally have to tear myself away from the television. I'm like, I'll just watch this scene, then I'll, oh no, okay, the next scene is good. All right, well, this next bit is good. I'll go after that. I'll get set, and that kind of.
And then you're edging to your seat, but you're like, okay, I'm not quite. And then you're backing away, but still glued to the television.
I know DMG was kidding. But he's actually onto something there. It's I can't really think of too many comedies. I mean, it's a road trip. You have all those great pictures of the shots of the planes. There's that great shot of them on that scooter coming up the mountain pass, and they're blocking all the traffic, like all the traffic stuck behind them because they can only go 20 miles an hour or whatever. Well, there's some great, they use the landscape amazingly. So maybe he's onto something. It's maybe one of the more cinematic comedies out there.
I'd also think Vacation.
Yeah.
Vacation. Heck, we covered Caddyshack. That's another one that has those golf course moments. They're really kind of taking advantage of the scenery. But I think Vacation and Dumb and Dumber, they're definitely they're looking for how can we make the whole shot just funny.
Yeah.
But
somebody should recut The Searchers as a comedy.
Ooh.
Just add different music and little AI and you're there.
Little editing. Terrible exactly. AI. Woof. All right, Jim. So let me ask you this. I think you know how I'm going to come out on this, but final verdict. We're not into final thoughts yet, but
sure.
Final verdict, at least on our main question here. Does it deserve the passive-aggressive hate it gets? What do you think?
I don't think so. Like I said, it took me a while to get into this one, so I can see if somebody watches the first hour and says, oh, this is kind of mediocre. But if you give it the time, it really does come together quite nicely and turns into a different movie by the end. Something actually quite, as I said, poignant. So,
for myself, I came into this whole project going, there's something wrong here, just as for the same reason. Like King's Speech, why are we talking? Why? There's a reason we don't talk about it. There is a different reason why, if we do talk about this film, it's not about its quality. there's other stuff going on here. So for me, it definitely doesn't deserve the hate. Does it deserve then to be put on some pedestal? No. You know, see it, you know, if it's on CTV, on the app. You don't even have to get paid. You don't have to pay for it. If it's on there for
in
free,
Canada.
like I'm not saying go pay for it, but if it's on there and you're looking for a Sunday afternoon to kill, this is I think it's better than Free Guy, actually. May not have as big a scope because they got all that, the whole idea of the video game and the big kind of world building sort of thing. But well, there's another movie that we could say is more cinematic. All right, Jim. Let me ask you this. Now that we've kind of dealt with that issue, do you think we're going to be talking about this movie or not? I suspect we will be, but if we are talking about this movie in 2030, how will we be talking about it? What do you think? Will it still be the same stuff? Just, hey, I remember that. It's on this list of terrible Oscars.
Yeah, you know, and I have to think that if you didn't have the Oscars, or if this got zero Oscar recognition, would it have been lost in the VHS remainder pile? It's not a diss on the movie, but or would it be in heavy rotation somewhere on AMC or something? But it's one that I haven't really thought about too often, except for its connection to the Oscars. Yeah, and I forgot tons about it. Like I've seen this before, and then all of a sudden I'm, after the movie, I'm checking out, did Christopher Marlowe really die that? This stuff's interesting. Die that young, and really, is that the order? Romeo, Juliet, then Twelfth Night, and what happens in Twelfth Night? And is her name really Viola? And blah, da, 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 and then that kind of thing. So it's sort of, I had forgotten a lot of it. So is it that memorable? I don't think so. And I think it's certainly boosted. It got the Oscar boost, right? That gives you a little bit of
Life,
immortality, maybe. Like I don't know if it's on the what's that big list of the archives do in the States? They archive the movie so it's forever,
Oh, like the Library of Congress says it's an
they
important
digitally save it or what have you. So like Wings or like some of those early Oscar winners might confer that sort of lifetime onto it. I think it benefits greatly from its Oscar association.
Yeah. Myself, I don't think so, except in relation to the Oscars. It will be more and more a thing where you really are, you're an Oscars nerd. And so you watch all these things, especially as people who, and this is one of the things this is another reason why I think all these award shows are just ridiculous. And I do mean, Jim, ridiculous bull. Is how passionate people are that was robbed. Because yes, when do veterans get attention? When will veterans now, because Saving Private Ryan was robbed, there'll be no movies celebrating veterans' sacrifice.
What was that war called again? World War R? I can't remember.
So it's fascinating to me. I find it more interesting how people get bent out of shape about this stuff and what it really says about them. I have no skin in the game on who wins what, which I'm not a member of that club. And this always kills me when any of this conversation comes up. It's like, what are you, a dues-paying member? Yeah. I did not know you're a member of the Academy. I did not know you spent.
Well, they want to be, though.
Yeah. I'm not a member of the club. It's a thing meant to market movies. It's remarkably effective at that. And and at one time was all designed around union busting. There's nothing for us there, for schmucks like ourselves there. So do I think it'll be talked about in 10 years, even 2030? Only in this context. It otherwise isn't that, let's say, great a film. I do want to add, and maybe it is, Jim, I think it might be time for final thoughts. And with your permission, I am going to start this one.
Sure.
You had mentioned earlier about how you felt it kind of had a TV quality and the sets and everything. It is definitely a studio picture, like made on the back lot.
Mm-hmm.
What I would put to you and anyone else who does dig this up, what you'll find is a lot of, especially 90s movies and earlier, if it didn't get a really fancy re-release, remaster, they look amateur in a way that other movies don't.
Yeah.
And a part of that is that you're seeing on a big 4K television. And when it was converted on the cheap to make a lot of money on DVDs with tube televisions and 4:3 aspect ratio, a standard definition. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, those flicks at times, especially if they didn't get a remaster, they look it. And that is one thing I noticed. It's like, wow, it really looks its age.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would put 25. To you that. What else? You said you had a couple of tidbits. I think some of them fell out over the course of the film. But is there anything else you wanted to add?
You know what? Just because of his recent passing, for me, the real, Judi Dench won the Best Supporting Oscar. Good on her. Gwyneth Paltrow won the Best Actress. And I think Jeffrey Rush was up too. But for me, the real North Star of this movie was Tom Wilkinson as the sort of the thug who Jeffrey Rush owed money to. And as he sort of strong arms his way into the production, he becomes a little bit more of a believer in his character, Fennyman, becomes a little more of a believer in the movie. And he even gets a part. He even gets words. He gets a speaking part. He just passed away in December, so R.I.P. But holy cow, watching his face.
He becomes one of the troupe.
He does. And I'm getting chills talking about it because his character totally... If you're going to watch anything in this movie, watch Tom Wilkinson's change from sort of just the money-grubbing thug to the guy who's like a true believer in art. And it's done for comedy, but it's such a beautiful role. And you see him in the background of scenes, and he's not even in focus, and you can just tell. He's still portraying Fennyman. He's rapt. His attention is rapt, and he just loves
the bug.
Theater. And what a great fucking performance. Sorry, he missed the swear.
No,
but
it's okay.
Jesus, I just watched him the whole time, and yeah.
Well, and this is it. You're open to the movie, you get these moments of joy.
Yeah,
and I think that is a testament to the quality of it is a well-told and sincere film. Yes, it's broad. It is a broad comedy.
Stuttering is funny. Yeah, exactly.
But it is sincere. There's some real human feeling.
Yeah.
And so, it is. It's worth a watch if it's on. And for those haters out there, let's say, let it go. Saving Private Ryan. And I'd say, let it go. I'd say, let the award stuff go. The Oscars is an interesting curator of film and of performance. And there, it's kind of like how we use it, Jim. You know, is more a curator for us.
Yeah.
We can only watch so much stuff. The Oscars can sift some of the nonsense out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw one thing where it's a rare year where no one says it didn't deserve the nomination.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a performance or a film.
Yeah.
But let that go and just enjoy the movie on its face. To compare it, talk about apples to oranges. You know, Saving Private Ryan has its place. No one was robbed. You know,
Yeah.
That will be a movie talked about that'll be a movie that's still talked about as a film in 2030.
Oh, yeah.
When you watch this, don't worry about that. The film doesn't care. Saving Private Ryan isn't crying.
Mm-hmm.
This one doesn't even know it won. Just enjoy it for what it is. And then, yeah, you can draw those great moments out because there's still some great performances here. Nepo babies, they all are, but great performances, real heart, and some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot, you know,
I
if you're a
the way
Harry Potter fan.
The whole credit list kept growing. Like the blah, blah, blah production by blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Also, it was presented with permission by, it was quite good. Just, you know, a lot of Harry Potter actors, Downton Abbey. There were a number, if you watch English movies, English shot movies or TV, you know, there's that guy and that guy and that guy and that guy, you know, it's kind of, it's kind of fun to pick through the cast. Yeah. And Jim Carter, who plays the butler on Downton Abbey, and Imelda Staunton, I just learned have been married for like 40 years. So
wow.
Yeah.
Small scene.
Yes.
In a smaller country,
small.
right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, it's interesting you mentioned that. And I was going to say, oh, that's very English, but it's also very Canadian. If there's a Canadian, a big movie shot in Canada, you see all the usual suspects of Canadian film and television. Because, in the end, it's like, who are the talents that the Americans will recognize or approve? And I mean that on a production sense. I don't mean the audience. All right, everyone. First of all, let us thank Dragon Movie Guy and Jelly Duck 100. Thank you guys both for coming out and hanging out. And let's give you a big round of applause. Now, I'm not saying Dumb and Dumber isn't the movie we're going to be covering soon. Actually, I am saying it. That wasn't the one. But that doesn't mean if you think we should talk about Dumb and Dumber in the context of one of these deeper dives on Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movie, let us know in the comments or in the chat right now. Otherwise, Jim, I think it's time for us to go. Please, whoopsie. Please like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to ring-a-ding that bell.
Happy Mother's Day. Happy Manitoba Day. Take care.
Still don't know what the hell is Manitoba Day.